President Trump announcing a new $500 billion AI project called Stargate. It's a private sector investment in infrastructure for artificial intelligence.
This is, to me, a very big thing. $500 billion Stargate project. I think it's going to be something that's very special. It'll lead to something that could be the biggest of all.
With a project of such massive size and scale, the potential for new cybersecurity threats could also loom large, and opportunities, perhaps, for those who fight them. We're bringing in Sanjay Poonen, CEO and president of Cohesity, which is a privately held cybersecurity company. Sanjay, thanks for being here. So, at this moment where we are seeing this huge interest in building out that AI infrastructure in the United States, kind of what role does cybersecurity play, and what role do you guys specifically play?
Thank you, Julie, for having me. Yes, I think it's an exciting time. We're optimistic, just like you heard David, and I think the business leaders speak about the new administration. We know several people there, and we're hopeful that the private sector and the public sector can continue its strong work to keep the country's data and the world's data safe. We are focused on protecting the world's data. And a lot of these projects, whether it's Stargate or others, are based on AI of large amounts of data. What we do well is protect the world's data and provide both tools to secure it from ransomware attacks, and the nation state actors are alive as always, but also provide AI tools. NVIDIA is an investor in us. SoftBank's an investor in us. So we will participate in many of these projects that emerge. Stargate's one exciting one. There'll be many more to protect the country's data.
There was, Sanjay, this very interesting theme that had been developing, and we were talking about this on the show today, of investors maybe starting to question all this spend, and where the return was. But obviously, a lot of enthusiasm. So I'm just curious how you think about that question and that dynamic.
Well, I think it's the private sector spending. I mean, this is not the $500 billion here or others. It's going to be the private sector raising money, whether it's SoftBank or others. And I think there's been a little bit of capital on the sidelines. But as interest rates go down, there is capital to be had as we raise money. As you know, we did this acquisition that took us from number 7 to number 1. We raised over $3 billion. And there was a lot of interest in our company from investors because there's money that we want to deploy in this area. So I think the attitude to investing, whether it's from private equity or venture capital, late stage funds, is high. And this is an area that does require investment. The data centers and things that are required in this area, GPUs are not cheap. So the investment's actually a good thing for this country. It will create U.S. jobs, and I'm pretty excited about that. We're excited about hiring people in the U.S., young engineers. So this is good for the United States. And I think as a citizen of this country, to see investment like this happening from large, important capital investment players is really, really good.
Sanjay, what does it do to the so-called threat surface, right? What's the vulnerability of, say, a physical plant, a physical AI data center versus the cloud versus some of the other advancements we've seen over the past few years?
Well, Julie, it's a good question. As the surface area of anything increases, so does the threat landscape. So we protect hundreds of exabytes, the most of anybody in place. Now is the number 1 player in this, over 12,000 customers at 85% of the Fortune 100. And we're talking constantly to them about their threat vectors. We have Kevin Mandy on our board, who is very involved in all the big cyber fighting in this country. And we also have a very strong federal business, both in military and civilian. So I'm often looking at every threat. We announced a few weeks ago a cyber emergency response team, like an incident response team, works very closely with Palo Alto and CrowdStrike and Mandiant. So we think that the threat surface here is going to increase. But what I'm excited about is this country's got some best cybersecurity minds that's going to fight the bad guys. And we have to be right all the time. They have to be right only once. But I do believe the security industry in here and countries like Israel and other kind of key countries are working together. We can ward off, and we're going to continue to learn. Now, what we do is ransomware protection. So we assume you're going to get hit, and then we recover the data fastest of anybody. That's an important aspect in the recovery and remediation process, not just the detection and prevention piece of security.
Sanjay, you all do business in China, so I am curious, how do you see the U.S.-China relationship evolving with Trump now back in the White House?
We chose, as we acquired Veritas, not to acquire the China entity. We felt that was right for the U.S. We do have engineering in India, but most of our investment is in the U.S. We're a U.S.-centric company. We do have business through distributors in China. It's an important piece of it. We're cautious. I have not had a great, kind of watching this from my days at VMware, of seeing IP protection there. So if I think the U.S. is wise, and when I talk to my tech counterpart CEOs, to be cautious about IP and about being able to do fair trade. China is a competitor of ours, and we've not often seen great success from Russia, China, Iran, North Korea in nation state attacks. But we're optimistic that, if peaceful relationship and IP is protected, that we would like to do business like any other tech company. So we'll be following what happens in the cybersecurity area, in AI, in working with all countries. Most of our business is in NATO-friendly countries today.
Sanjay, in terms of threats from China, we, in the first Trump administration, when we first started seeing, trade war tensions sort of rising, did we also see a commensurate increase in cyber attacks from China? Do we see any kind of parallel between that?
In the last 8 years, there have been increased attacks mostly from Russia and some other countries, but China is on the radar of many of the cybersecurity folks that we work with in the government, and you have to be on the alert. And the nation state is sort of the top level, but then when you go below it, there's e-crime and just sort of people just hacking their way into it. A little bit like you see these like drones today that can be very cheap to build. Cyber attacks can be very cheap to build, and AI actually helps you build them faster. So we've got to be on the alert for any of these bigger nation states who have military constructs that can fund many of these efforts. But many of them are also just sort of notorious gangs that now learn from that and can easily. And the good news is I think there's focus on this. We've got to take care of our infrastructure, whether it's electric plants, nuclear plants, electricity, water, all of those stuff. But then every industry, whether it's financial services, retail, healthcare, we work a lot in healthcare. Hospitals are getting attacked. We've got to make sure that our healthcare records, schools, many school districts are getting attacked. And we find this cause of protecting the world's data a very, very noble cause to ensure that we keep everybody safe from cyber attacks going forward.
Sanjay, finally, as you alluded to, you heard that conversation between our Brian Sazi and David Rubenstein where they were talking about the many, many companies that have decided to stay private and not to go public in this market. I'm curious about Cohesity, what you guys are planning. Are you content to stay in the private markets for now, or do you have a plan to go public at some point?
Well, Carlyle is an investor in us, and David knows us pretty well. We chose to do this deal. So as you know, this was the most iconic deal. Number 7, Cohesity acquiring number 2, Veritas, to create a new number 1 in this place, Cohesity. And we chose to do this deal and wait. And we didn't feel last year was a great environment to go public. We think this year and next year will be. So certainly doing an IPO is on the radar. It's not the destination of any company. It's a milestone. And we are the most profitable company. We're getting close to about $2 billion in revenue. We're the most profitable growth company in our sector and number 1 with a strong base. So we will be public ready when we're ready. But for the past 12 months, we decided to do this deal, digest it, and then we'll be ready. And it's much better, I think, to go public as number 1 in the space rather than number 7.